field of education. An education that he argued so forcefully, so firmly, could not be reduced to the practical and immediate tasks involved in, with dignity, recovering selfhood and economic opportunities by learning to sweep the floor correctly and in the right way, but a form of education that was not agrarian or technical, a form of education imbued with humanist goals which allowed any individual to pursue their own curiosity in any direction as far as that curiosity could take them. And without concern with the boundaries, the intellectual boundaries that disciplinary thinking placed in their path. So Du Bois' writing in so many fields creates a critical vocabulary which has shaped all subsequent work on the meaning of race and the significance of racism. He's someone who, moving, I think, initially from a kind of elitist view of this, moves through a kind of Fabian socialism, a universalism informed by his interest in the Baha'i faith, a distinctive critique of historical materialism, elaborated through his work in economic history and his survey of the political transformation of the southern states in the post-slave moment of Reconstruction, and a kind of complex relationship with social science that begins from the influence of Spencer over his thinking and moves through his intimate association with the writers he found in Germany, Simmel and Weber in particular. As I'm sure, again, many of you will know, but not all will know, Du Bois, as a visiting student in Berlin, wrote a PhD thesis there in economics, which he couldn't receive because he had not been in residence long enough to be awarded the degree. So he returns to the United States somewhat reluctantly to write another PhD in the field of economic history. And I suppose as a young scholar, I was rather struck and in awe of these accomplishments, and they offered me a model that I've strived, obviously inadequately, to emulate in the work that I've done since then. Du Bois saw this concept of double consciousness emerging from between racial subordination and the blocked promise of citizenship. Ever the dialectician, at least in that stage of his intellectual enterprise, he wanted to resolve that antagonism in a dialectical pattern. I'm not sure that luxury is open to us any longer, but perhaps that's something that will emerge later on today. The term planetary humanism shifts emphasis away from existing institutional arrangements, away, in a sense, from the problematics of national citizenship, thwarted or otherwise. But I think it can contribute to the difficult task of constructing the question of human life on several scales simultaneously. Not the automatic or default level of the national state and the forms of methodological nationalism that we find there, but taking the argument onto a number of different scales simultaneously. The term, of course, emerges from the work of the Martinican statesman and poet Aimé Césaire, who, surveying the wreckage of Western Europe in the period immediately after the Second World War, and with events in Hiroshima and Nagasaki clearly in his mind, pronounced that Western Europe was never further away from being able to live and practice an authentic humanism, that the situation, that the circumstances demanded. And there too is a challenge. There too is a challenge that I've tried to address in my work, and which I know is something that resonates strongly in the thinking of the scholars who have joined me today in this symposium, and to whom, of course, I'm extremely grateful. It's wonderful to have four scholars whose work I admire so much share this conversation with us here today in Bergen. Césaire speaks of a humanism made to the measure of the world. And that perspective is absolutely at the heart of his indictment of the horrors of the 20th century, in which formal assertions of equality combine so peculiarly, so perversely, with with the practice of genocidal violence. So I think we can enter the space between these two different conceptual frames and use that as a starting point for the conversation today. Of course, our circumstances are different to either of the thinkers that I have mentioned. We can, I think, begin to build then on the legacies and the legacies of the others with whom they were in dialogue, and to use that conversation to begin to address new circumstances. Circumstances which oblige us to take new risks in the field of humanistic thinking, to decide and be bold in saying not only what we are against, but what we favour. To take the risk of being able to identify the world we want to bring into being with a greater precision than perhaps we've been inclined to do previously. To speculate about the inevitable appearance of a new settlement between the overdeveloped citadels of the world and its developmentally arrested and exploited zones, a process of reparative reconstruction which is overdue, which demands a reckoning with colonial history and with the limitations of forms of democratic life and social life that have been articulated in colour-coded forms along the lines of racial hierarchy. I think that later stage of reflection is essential to meet the political and economic challenges, the moral and conceptual challenges that will be forced on us anyway by the transformation of our climate. And I suppose I want to speculate that the legacy of this Black Atlantic humanism, if I might call it that, can contribute greatly to that, not only in the interests of slaves and their descendants, but of course in the interests of everyone. So, let's see what we need to find, where we can find resources in which we can begin to think about pursuing that project, that emancipatory project, in conditions that await us, and let's see what we can bring with us from the intervention of Du Bois at the beginning of the 20th century and the intervention of Césaire in the middle of the 20th century as we look to the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Gilroy.